And Jackie here, along with a good friend, Michael Jankins. How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well.
Okay, bankruptcy attorney joining us, answering some questions about bankruptcy that you might have, some things that people may have been confused about. He can clear them up.
Yeah, commonly asked questions like, let's start things off. What's bankruptcy?
Yeah, there you go. Okay, we'll just sit back and let you answer the question, okay?
How long do you have to talk?
Go.
So that's kind of a tough question when they call, what is it? So I try to just make it nice and basic and say, essentially, if you're going to file bankruptcy, it's a kind of law that gets rid of unsecured debts. So we give examples. It gets rid of your credit cards, your medical bills, your unsecured loans, your payday loans, old cell phone accounts, bounce checks, and a miscellaneous other things. So it'll erase those if you qualify for it. So that's the simple answer to their question.
Is there a certain extreme? Because I feel like all Americans are in some sort of debt.
Yeah, some kind of financial strain.
Do you say it should at least be this much before we proceed?
I don't really characterize how much it should be. I mean, sometimes that will be my next question when I'm talking to people. I'll go, well, how much debt do you have?
Okay.
To see if they're in need. And so they'll go, well, how much do I need?
Right.
And I go, well, enough that it makes it worth spending the money to do it to begin with.
True.
And so I would say, on average, somewhere around probably $10,000. Is it to say that, you couldn't file if you had less under the right circumstances we have? But that's usually kind of an arbitrary mark that we're looking at.
That you can throw out there, but everybody's situation is different.
But being in a financial pinch at the sum of, but say you just use 10,000 as a number, that's enough to be a life-changing number for people. And if you can have that eliminated, you can get back to some normalcy.
Sure. I mean, if you're a single mom and you're working and you're making $8.50, $9 an hour, you could get your wages garnished if there was a judgment against you. And folks like that are, skimping every penny just to make the rent the next month and something like that. And we see this quite often. They call, if this happens, I'm not going to be able to pay my rent and I'm going to get tossed out of my apartment. So it is a life-changing event for these people.
All right, so that's kind of the basic idea of bankruptcy, but there's different kinds. So let's say maybe Chapter 13.
Yeah, so sometimes people will call up, and when I hear them ask this, I'm already kind of going, well, I don't know if they really know what they're asking. They'll say, I'd like to do a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Well, first of all, that is a specific type of bankruptcy versus Chapter 7, which is what most people think of when they think of doing bankruptcy.
Okay.
And so either the person has actually gone on my website, hopefully, and read about it, or gone somewhere and looked up some information, and know exactly what their goal is.
Right.
But often it's not the case. They've got misconceptions about what you can do in bankruptcy. And so they'll call and say, oh, I do Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And I go, okay, why? Is it to save your house from a foreclosure like we've spoken about many times here on the show in the past? No, I just don't want to lose my house and I don't want to lose my car. I want to keep those. Well, that's fine, but you can keep those in a Chapter 7.
Right.
So as long as you're making your ongoing payments on those and you're not way behind, if you file Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you still get to keep your car, you still get to keep your house, you just got to pay for them.
So what is the difference with Chapter 13, just really briefly?
So and then I'll ask, well, do you really want to do a Chapter 13? Because if you do, what we do for you is we set up a payment program in the court. So unlike the people that take Chapter 7 and can erase the credit card debts, well, you're going to be paying them for the next 3 to 5 years. We'll set up a budget for you to live on. We'll see what you take home a month for your family income, and then whatever money's left over, you can pay that to the court each month, and they'll take that money and divide it up among all your unsecured creditors and take care of paying all those things. All the interest stops running, so you actually have a more effective way of paying them, and you can pay those off, or at least pay them substantially in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't want to do that. So.
No, so it sounds like Chapter 13 is more of a payment plan.
It's exactly a payment plan.
Yeah, as opposed to a Chapter 7, which will help you eliminate the debt that you have.
Exactly. And when you have a payment plan, Chapter 13, it's got other tools that you can accomplish things that, other than just the goal being you want to pay all your other debt. I mean, one of the primary things it does for people that are losing their home, and it's a tool that they use, is to save their home that's in a foreclosure, because all the back amounts they owe, just becomes a single debt along with the credit cards and the other things
So
that
then
gets
you're
paid
not
back.
behind then. Then you're on track for making the payments.
You get back on track.
You get back
because
on track.
If you're $15,000 behind in your house payments, along with all the fees that have accrued because of the lawyer's fees and the
Right.
foreclosure
Right.
costs, that kind of becomes one of the debts that gets paid back in the payment program. So that one will be paid first.
So you're not 15 grand in a hole. You just have to keep up with the payments that they've arranged.
You've got to keep up with the
payments
payments.
they
You're
have
still
arranged.
in the hole, but you're allowed to pay that back.
Okay.
Whereas outside of bankruptcy, if they don't agree to do such a thing, you're not going to be able to do that.
Okay,
Right.
I
So
get
it's
it.
you can force them to do it without their permission.
Okay.
So it's kind of a very nice thing. So Chapter 13 is really good for that. So that's one of the driving factors for people doing a Chapter 13.
Here's a
Kinda give me
totally
the
off-the-wall
difference.
question here. We talk about Chapter 7, we talk about Chapter 13. Are there chapters 1 through 6?
No,
Okay.
there are there
They
are
skipped
other
a couple chapters.
There are other chapters. There's a Chapter 11 that people have heard about. That's where, like, Jankins folds.
Business.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
Chapter
Sure.
11.
Okay.
When the auto industry was cratering and General Motors went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy to
Okay.
save the industry. So those are Chapter 11s. There's a similar kind of bankruptcy for reorganizing that exists for farmers called Chapter 12.
I didn't know that.
And then there's one other chapter that I know next to nothing about, which is called Chapter 9, which is for cities, municipalities that need to restructure. I'm not certain, but I believe Detroit had
was
to
gonna
go
say
through
Detroit
one.
did
That's
that.
one of them? Okay.
And there have been other cities that actually had to file a reorganization because their financial things had gone so badly.
Is there one for the country? No? Okay, never mind. Okay, so let's talk about what we can get rid of.
It's called the debt ceiling.
Oh,
Just keep
thank you,
raising it.
thank you. Just keep raising it.
Chapter 50.
Unfortunately, we can't do that as individuals. Okay, but we can get rid of some things, but people kind of get confused about specifics. So you mentioned medical bills as one
Yeah.
of them. How about student loans?
So people will call up because a lot of people do understand that you can't get rid of the government student loans, but they call up and go, hey, I got private student loans. Can I get rid of those?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No. Okay.
No student loans. So that might change someday. There's lots and lots of talk about it, and there's been people in Congress talking about it, but there's not a big movement that can get behind it.
As of right now, you cannot get rid
You
of it.
cannot get rid of those. I mean, there are some exceptions that exist where people can go in bankruptcy and challenge the thing, so, ask that they be eliminated, but the standard is so difficult to prove, it is almost non-existent as far as people being able
Okay,
to
I want to talk
accomplish
about
it.
spouses here if we can. If you are filing a bankruptcy, like a Chapter 7 or 13, does your spouse automatically get rolled into that too?
No, that's a question that comes up a lot of times because one spouse either doesn't want to file because they just don't want to be involved in it, and so I'll get a gal call up or a guy and says, I need to file, but my spouse won't do it. Can I still do it? And the answer is yes, you can. And sometimes the other spouse doesn't have any debts at all, and so you don't put people in bankruptcy that don't have debts, either because they've come from second relationships, and so it might be a second marriage for both, and one of them has no debt. And sometimes we have people that, just for one reason or another, all the debt's in one person's name. Someone just likes to always use the credit cards. It's not a good thing, but we see it. So yeah, we can do it with just one spouse, and that we get a call like that probably a few times a month.
Okay, good to know. Now, another thing that usually racks up, if you let it get out of hand, happens to be taxes. What about those?
Well, people call up and go, what can I do about my taxes? And some of it is nothing. You're stuck. But
Right.
if the taxes are old enough, there's certain conditions that you can get rid of income taxes. And the minimum standard is you had to have filed, and they have to have been owing for at least 3 years. So the tax year that would be the most recent that we could get rid of, if you meet all the conditions, would be 2014, because you would have filed in 15 and 3 years has gone by now, so those could go away.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about other judgments that might have come down that happen once you file. Are we still able to take all those into consideration?
Yeah, so people, if they don't pay their credit cards and medical bills a long time, get sued, and then there's judgments against them. But they'll call up and they'll go, well, I need to file bankruptcy, but I got these judgments. Can I get rid of those too? Is it too late?
Okay.
Well, it's never too late.
It's never too late.
Never too late?
Okay.
So if you got judgments against you, 2 or 10, you can get rid of all that. They're just debts. They're just debts that cause more problems when you're not in bankruptcy, so they go away too.
Okay, now what about the situation people might run into? You have the workforce development. You might have been out of work and they're paying you, unemployment, and maybe they overpaid you. Okay,
Yeah.
what happens there? Because you have all that money, and then you get a letter that says, okay, we want our money back.
Right, and the overpayment often happens because they were awarded the benefit, and then after there's an appeal and the employer wins, they go, oops, you have to give it back now, that money we paid you.
Okay.
Well, as long as there was no fraud involved, like you had gone back to work and still collected unemployment where they could challenge you, generally those debts can go away too, even though it's the government of Iowa. Some people think if government's involved, well, we can't get rid of those, but if you can get rid of taxes, you can get rid of lots of other government debt too, and so that's when that goes away. Another quick one on government stuff, Social Security overpayments can happen too.
They can.
And when they happen, it's usually a big amount. I mean, we see overpayments that are $20,000.
Oh my gosh.
And then the way they come after a person is if they're getting their benefits, now they start taking it back out of their current benefits. And so when people are getting that money, they usually are desperate to live on it. And so we can also make those go away. We probably have that come up a couple times a year. I'm filing one right now, actually, where we've got one of those, and it's a big amount, so those can go away.
It sounds like when the government gets involved, that's when it can get a little tricky. So it's important to have someone who knows what they're talking about so they can guide you in the right directions of what exactly can happen. Let's say maybe we didn't cover all the common questions today and people still have some. How can they get in touch with you?
You can call me on the phone, and usually we can answer those for you, 255-1855. You can find us on the internet. My website answers a lot of those questions at www.iowa-bankruptcylaw.com, or you can follow us on Facebook, and many of the articles that we have and the videos from our show here answer those questions as well.
Absolutely, and you do consultations as well.
Free.
Just make sure you're prepared, and we have a video on that as well if you'd like to check that out.
Just be prepared. That was the key. So watch the video first, find out what you need and what you need to bring to Michael. So when you sit down and go, here's my deal, here's what I'm in debt over, and have everything ready to go. And you can take care of that in short order, can't you?
Very much, yeah.
All right.
Perfect.
Great answers today to some common questions when it comes to bankruptcy. You're watching